Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you for the Canadian Association on Gerontology for inviting me here to speak. This is what we are going to be doing today. Let's see. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking to you about my work and research on songwriting, specifically with people living with dementia, as a way to challenge stigma. And so, what we're going to do is I'm going to start with an overview about the effects of stigma associated with dementia. Then we're going to go into the literature on music therapy and the use of music more broadly in the dementia context. I'm then going to outline what therapeutic songwriting is, show some case examples from my clinical work I've done, and discuss future directions in research. And we'll definitely have time for questions at the end. So welcome. Before we get started, I just want to give a quick background on who I am and how I got here. First and foremost, I'm a singer-songwriter, and I started writing songs when I was quite young. Um, and I had a quick, brief career in the music industry before I realized that I really wanted to be engaging more personally with people using music. So I decided to go to Laurier for my bachelor in music therapy. And then I did my master's of music and health science at U of T. And during this time, I was working at Kensington Gardens, which is a long-term care home in Toronto. And I was a music therapist there, and I created their music therapy program in a music studio within the home so residents could write and record music. And so I remember when I was doing this work, a lot of people would ask me, how do people living with dementia even write songs? I didn't know that they could do that. So I realized during this time that there's actually a lot of stigma associated with the capabilities of people living with dementia. So I decided to go back to school to do my PhD at Waterloo in aging health and well-being to explore this more. And that's what I'm doing now. Hopefully done this year. Okay. So before we get into the literature on music therapy, I really wanted to start with a personal narrative of the potential consequences of stigma associated with dementia. So this is a photo of my grandfather, or my Zaidi, Wolf Kurta. My Zaidi was a Holocaust survivor who embodied strength, resilience, and courage despite his parents and seven siblings being murdered in the concentration camps. In the summer of 2019, I received a call saying that my Zaidi had had a stroke. So I raced to the emergency room and I witnessed him tied to a hospital bed in four restraints with this very blank look in his eyes. And the doctor informed me that he was agitated and antagonizing hospital staff, which I found interesting. He was only about 4'9". So he couldn't do that much damage. And so what they did is after being given antipsychotic medication, he calmed down enough so that the restraints could be removed. However, as the medication wore off, he became agitated again. And so this time I witnessed what happened when they tried to restrain him. He screamed out in a way that's been forever etched in my memory. And the next day, when I was sitting beside him in the hospital room, he apologized to me. He explained that hospitals made him think he was back in Auschwitz. In April of 2020, a year after cognitive decline, my Zaidi had another stroke. And because of a COVID-19 outbreak in the hospital, none of us could be with him. Again, we were told that because he was agitated, they had to restrain him. He ended up dying during this time in the hospital. And every day that goes by, I think about my Zaidi, who endured really the unimaginable, dying alone, thinking he was in a concentration camp. In this situation, it's clear that when a person with dementia exhibits distress, we will restrain them before trying to figure out why they may be experiencing this distress to begin with. The pandemic also revealed the real life consequences of stigma related to dementia and the real life effects that can have on people. So, for example, I was working in long term care during this time where I saw people living with dementia locked and confined to their rooms for months at a time, unable to see or visit with their family and friends. And I also sat with people like my Zaidi who were forced to die without their loved ones by their side. Unfortunately, obviously, I wasn't alone in what I was seeing. In the Ontario's Long-Term Care COVID-19 Commission final report, many residents living in long-term care settings experience confinement syndrome, a condition prevalent among individuals put in solitary confinement. So, for example, one resident living in long-term care shared, I've been hit in what I call I've been in what I call a pandemic prison and solitary since April of 2020. The solitary happens when anyone tests positive in the entire home, and every single one of us must stay in our rooms without being allowed a shower. And even the same goes when we return from a hospital stay. 14 days isolation, no shower. I also want to recognize that the mistreatment of people living with dementia in our communities is not solely based on stigma. For example, the lack of resources is obviously a major contributor to the state of care for people living with dementia, and we're doing the best we can with the resources that we're given. But I do argue that the ways we view people living with dementia as a broader society does affect their ability to be treated as full citizens. So, for example, people living with dementia are really stigmatized in society and often labeled in the academic literature, policy documents, in the media, especially the media, as aggressive, uncontrolled, doomed, or socially dead. And this stigma has a profound consequences for people living with dementia and their family members, shaping how people think about people living with dementia, their relationships with others, and the structures and experiences of care. And these experiences lead to fear, isolation, exclusion, and the silencing of people living with dementia, decreasing their quality of life and denying them their basic human rights. In the dementia context, a major contributor to stigma associated with dementia are models of care which focus solely on fixing and curing symptoms. So for example, the biomedical model is a model of care where disability and illness is seen as something that should be treated. So for example, curing or fixing symptoms of a disease. And I want to be very clear that this model isn't bad. There's many times where people need medical attention. If I need heart surgery, I want the biomedical model of care. Rather, it's when we default to this way of thinking in the context of non-medical activities, and in this case, what we'll talk about today, music, that it can pose issues on the way we view people living with dementia. So before we get into the literature on music therapy in the dementia context, I just want to give a brief definition of what music therapy is. So music therapy is a discipline in which certified music therapists use music purposefully within therapeutic relationships to support development, health, and well-being. Music therapists use music safely and ethically to address human needs within cognitive, I can't say this word, I don't know why, communicative, emotional, musical, physical, social, and spiritual domains. So there are so many different models and approaches, schools of thought in the music therapy profession, some of which are very strictly rooted in the biomedical model, some which focus on creative self-expression and quality of life, and others which use music for social justice purposes. So in looking into the literature on music therapy with people living with dementia, what I find really interesting is that despite the broad range of approaches to practice, the literature on music therapy with people living with dementia is like really overly saturated with studies which use music to treat symptoms of dementia. So for example, you hear a lot about music therapy being used to improve memory recall or to manage behaviors associated with dementia, especially with the research coming out about how psychotropic medication can be quite dangerous at times. Another thing I found is that the literature in music therapy often describes people living with dementia as confused, agitated, aggressive, disruptive. Unfortunately, when the ways music therapy can be used with people living with dementia is vastly represented by this one approach, it's really missing all the other ways that music therapists are already using music to enhance the lives of people with dementia. And it also ignores the fact that most people don't come to music therapy to be treated, but instead to engage meaningfully with music. So for example, I have never worked with someone living with dementia who's come to my office and said, I really want to use music to improve my memory. That's never happened. It's usually something to do with, I love music. I have such a deep relationship with music and I want to sing with you. And that's enough. Using music to improve symptoms of dementia, I argue, is something that we put onto people and not something that they ask for themselves often. This trend is also prevalent in the literature on music and recreation, so music for well-being more broadly. And many studies I found tend to emphasize how music can manage behaviors or, like I said, improve memory recall. And I also want to be very clear that just because the literature focuses on music therapy within a biomedical context that's really not often or always representative of what's happening in practice. I know so many music therapists using music with people with dementia to support creative self-expression and even for social justice purposes. So like I said, despite the biomedical model being very heavily used in a music therapy context with people living with dementia, the field of music therapy is really vast. Um, So for example, there's many approaches that I use in practice that are really strengths-based, one of them being resource-oriented music therapy, which focuses on the nurturing of strengths, resources, and potentials. And in this approach, the nurturing of strengths and resources rejects approaches to practice which focus on deficit and instead really strives to celebrate the unique strengths of each individual. There's also a model called community music therapy, which is an approach to practice premised on participatory music making, inclusion, and equity in communities. Like I said, and I'm really going to drive this point home, that despite the broad range of approaches to music therapy, when we get to dementia, it's really used to treat symptoms of dementia. And I find that this is a real shame because a role music can play in resisting stigma. And there's a lot of literature on this and things that we see in the real world all the time that we're going to explore soon. So now I want to move to the literature specifically on therapeutic songwriting. So Baker defines therapeutic songwriting as a process of creating, notating, and or recording lyrics and music by the client or clients and therapists within a therapeutic relationship to address psychosocial, emotional, cognitive, and communication needs of the client. So similar to the landscape of music therapy, therapeutic songwriting approaches are informed by various theoretical frameworks, including cognitive, neurorehabilitative, psychosocial, and social activist domains. So, for example, therapeutic songwriting has been used to improve cognition and memory with people with traumatic brain injuries, to aid in end-of-life work in palliative and cancer care settings, and in social justice initiatives to challenge social norms and stigma. In the 1990s, the music therapy literature on, since the 1990s, sorry, the music therapy literature on therapeutic songwriting has been steadily increasing. So for example, from 1990 to 1999, there were 14 studies published on the topic. From 2000 to 2005, 23 studies. And then by 2014, there were over 50 studies. I recently did a quick literature review on how many studies have been published since 2020 and 2024, which revealed approximately 886 studies, which there's a large leap. But not surprisingly, though this literature is quite extensive, it's really used way less frequently with people living with dementia. So I believe that this is perhaps related to the assumptions we hold about the cognitive capabilities of people living with dementia. There's actually only about 8 studies which use songwriting with people living with dementia. And again, it's really used to promote memory recall. So the power of the arts, and specifically the use of songs and songwriting in creating space for social dialogue and transformation, is recognized widely in the academic literature. So for example, I really love this quote, which says, as a song, oh, sorry, what does it say? Here, I have it here, and I can't see it now because I see all your faces. One second. There we go. Singing songs can reclaim all voices to build inclusive communities and confront social concerns, and engage audiences in confronting conditions of inequity and injustice, envisioning alternative possibilities, and daring to consider their personal responsibility. As a songwriter, I really believe in the power of song in raising social awareness and creating alternative narratives which resist oppressive systems and structures. So for example, when we think of songs that challenge social structures, we're often brought to the protest songs of the 1960s, which drew awareness to issues regarding war, women's rights, and the civil rights movement. And additionally, songwriting is a highly adaptive tool, which we're going to see a little bit later, which makes it a really great fit for people living with dementia. So now what I want to do is share a few case examples of my work writing songs with people living with dementia. And this first example is about Jean. When I started working with Jean, she was about 85, had difficulty speaking in full sentences, but she was able to read and sing entire songs. She would also answer questions in full sentences if she was given the time to think about what she was being asked. And she would also, she really loved to sing and would often cry tears of joy when we sang her favorite songs. I'd been working with her for about a month when I asked her if she'd be interested in songwriting. She was really excited about this idea because she was getting really frustrated with staff and family members sort of disregarding what she had to say because it took her a little bit longer to say it. And so we felt that this would be a really good way for her to really express herself in a creative way. So when I asked her to write a song, she was telling me that day about this stuffed toy rabbit she had in her room that she named Peter. And Peter had provided her with a lot of comfort when she was feeling lonely. So she wanted to write a song for Peter to thank him. So to get the songwriting process started, I started asking Jean some questions like, what would you like to thank Peter for? And what do you love about Peter? And then I also asked her some questions about what Peter looked like and why he made her happy to get a description of him. And after she answered these questions, I used a resource-oriented approach to music therapy, which we talked about before. And I asked her, what do you think Peter would have to say about you? And I remember she paused and she sort of sat back and she said, well, that's interesting. I haven't thought about it. I think he would say that I'm a great person. And I actually want to go back to how my preconceptions about people living with dementia are often challenged in this work, because I remember when I asked her, what would you like to thank Peter for? She said, I want to thank him for his versatility. And I remember being really surprised that she still had access to that type of language. And so it was an important reminder for me to challenge my preconceptions as well. So anyways, I was asking her these questions. I wrote down some other ones for her to think about and bring back the next week. So she wrote the answers with her daughter to these questions, and together we put it to music, which I'm going to play now. Hold on, let me get there. And I've written the lyrics down here. And when I asked if she wanted to record the song with me and sing with me, she said, not this time, I'll sing on the next one. So you'll just hear me in this one. So after we wrote Peter Rabbit, Jean was on like a real songwriting kick. And I remember she came to the music therapy room one day and she was feeling a little bit down, and we were talking about why she was really, really frustrated because whenever she was trying to fall asleep, she heard all of this noise in her head and there were noise in the hallway. And it was so frustrating. And she wanted to write a song about this that she could listen to when she felt frustrated when she was trying to sleep. Um, and so we had a similar process where I was asking her questions, what do you want to happen? How do you feel when the noise is gone? And she would say things like, I feel light. I can sleep. It really came back to this theme of really wanting to sleep. And on this one, Jean said she would like to sing. So you will hear her if you listen very carefully at the end, especially you'll hear her. Was the volume okay in the last song? Could you hear that?
Yeah, it's good.
Yes.
Yeah, it was okay. Okay, great. Okay, so this is called The Noise Is Gone. I think about the noise not being there. Without the noise, I feel like the noise is gone. The noise is gone. And now I can sleep. The noise is gone. The noise is gone. And now I can sleep. The rain has lifted. Oh, I feel so good. The noise has gone. The noise has gone. And now I can sleep. The noise has gone. The noise has gone. And now I can sleep. Her daughter was there and was very happy. There we go. Okay, so the next example is about Ellen. And when Ellen first came to music therapy, she was about 101. She actually lived until she was 107. She was an incredible woman. She came to the music therapy room and said, I want to try something new and I don't want to say no to things. So let's try music. And it was wonderful. It was so wonderful to work with her. And Ellen had this like really incredible gift for rhyming. And she would usually just like waltz into the office, sit down, and played the xylophone. And she would make up these little melodies and come up with these rhymes, these nursery rhymes almost, about her current mood, her past experiences, and her family members. She also, all of her family lived in the States. A lot of them lived in the States. And she had three great grandchildren that she wanted to leave a gift for. So I used this to set the stage for songwriting. And I asked if, she'd like to write a song for them as a legacy. So Ellen ended up writing three songs for each of her great grandchildren. We recorded them, sent them to her family, and her family actually printed off the lyrics, and now all of the lyrics are framed in each child's room. So I'm going to play two of them for you. So the first one's about Benny.
Benny, 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 my sweet little boy. Benny, 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 you are much nicer than a toy. Benny, 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 you are more precious than a penny. Benny, 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 you bring us lots of joy.
So that was Benny, and now I'm going to play Faith.
Faith, you're our first and only girl. Faith, you're more precious than a pearl. Faith, you're my beautiful little girl. Life gets better when we're together. We love you more as the years go by. I love you, Faith. You're the apple of my eye.
There we go. So, hold on, let me get my notes back. Okay, there we go. So these case examples really do show that people living with dementia are in fact able to write really meaningful and beautiful music, as long as we support them in doing that. And while they might challenge stigma in the sense that, it challenges our preconceived notions about the capabilities of living with dementia, it doesn't actually talk about challenging stigma specifically. And so that's the next stage of what we need to do. So we really need to be conducting research on using songwriting specifically as a tool to challenge stigma. And my doctoral research uses collaborative songwriting, and I'm going to be working with about 5 to 8 people living with dementia to write a song about what they want the world to know about them. We're then going to have the opportunity to record the song at a professional music studio called Metalworks in Mississauga, and we're going to create a live off the floor music video to go along with it, which will then be released on social media platforms and at a release party to challenge dementia specifically, which is being funded by the RIA. And before I end today, what I want to do is share a song written by Reimagining Dementia, a creative coalition for justice. And it's a coalition I joined in the pandemic. And what we did is during the pandemic, we wanted a way for all of us to connect. And there's about 700 members from all over the world. So together we wrote a song about what it looks like to live well with dementia as a way to challenge the tragedy narrative associated with the diagnosis. So this song was written by people living with dementia, their care partners, academics, songwriters, artists, producers, and people from all over the world sent in pictures and videos of them and their loved ones feeling joy and sharing joy. So I'm going to share that with you now. Oh, and something I actually want to add about this is since the song's release, people in other countries have created their own version of the song. So for example, there's a version of this song that was done in Malaysia about what it looks like to live well with dementia in their community.
Joy in the sunshine, bow and bend with the rain. Our roots run together. We are like birds of a feather. You lead and I lead, we get there together. You hear my song, you sing along and we fly. It's a new day, it's a new way, it's a new day, it's a new way, let's reimagine. It's a bold day, let's create a world where everyone can thrive. A together day, where the joy of one is the joy of all our life. It's a fearless day, it's a hopeful way, let's reimagine. It's a fearless day, it's a hopeful way, let's reimagine. It's a fearless day, it's a hopeful way, let's reimagine. Let's tend our garden.
Given the space, we all can blossom.
Different ability, gorgeous diversity grows.
We thrive together.
Some people who I thought were my friends kind of disappeared. And I think it was because out of fear, because of what they thought the disease was.
And there's nothing more devastating than when you go, you get your results, and the doctor no longer talks to you.
Because I want to see a different sort of attitude coming out from the world out there.
Let's create a world where everyone can cry. A together day where the joy of one is the joy of all our lives. It's a fearless day, it's a hopeful day, let's reimagine. It's a fearless day, it's a hopeful day, let's reimagine. It's a fearless day, it's a hopeful way, let's reimagine. It's a fearless day, it's a hopeful way, let's reimagine.
ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਮਿਲ ਜੁਲ ਕੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰੀਏ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਬਿਹਤਰ ਬਣਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹੋ
हम सब मिलकर संसार को बदल सकते हैं
We are the change that is needed. Come join the change as we see it. We are the change that is needed. Come join the change as we see it. We are the change that is needed. It's a bold day, let's create a world where everyone can thrive. A together day where the joy of one is the joy of all our lives. It's a hopeful way, let's reimagine. It's a fearless day, it's a hopeful way, let's reimagine. It's a fearless day, it's a hopeful way, let's reimagine. It's a fearless day, it's a hopeful way, let's reimagine.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop it there and come back to all of you. Hold on, there we go. So that's my presentation. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.